doctor, have mercy. He is in so much pain. Please remove the machines and let him rest.
They say money can't buy happiness, but can it buy peace? Margaret Okonkwo stood in the corridor of Lagos University Teaching Hospital, her Hermes bag clutched against her designer Agbada. Inside room 407, her only son, Chukwuemeka, lay connected to machines that beeped in a rhythm she had memorized over 18 months. She had spent 47 million naira. She had flown in specialists from Johns Hopkins, from Mumbai, from Berlin. She had prayed at every church from Lekki to Enugu. She had consulted Babalawo, pastors, and priests. Nothing worked. And now she was about to make a decision that would either damn her soul or finally set it free. This is the story of a mother's impossible choice. The story of how wealth became a burden and love became a weapon. But before we continue, I need to ask you something. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad once told me I wouldn't reach 100,000 subscribers. But I believe stories like this deserve to be told. If you believe that too, please subscribe and help me show that these stories matter. Now, let's continue. Margaret Okonkwo wasn't born rich. She was born in a boys' quarters in Surulere, the last of 7 children. Her father was a factory worker. Her mother sold a kara by the roadside. But Margaret had something none of her siblings possessed, an iron will wrapped in velvet gloves. She put herself through University of Lagos, working 3 jobs. She graduated top of her class in business administration. By 30, she owned a logistics company. By 40, she had contracts with multinationals across West Africa. By 50, she was worth over 2 billion naira. She married late. Chief Okonkwo was a good man, 15 years her senior, a retired permanent secretary who understood that Margaret's business came first. They tried for children for 7 years. When Chukwuemeka finally came, a miracle baby, the doctors called him, Margaret was 42 years old. She poured everything into that boy. The best schools, Corona, King's College, then abroad to University of Manchester. Chukwuemeka was brilliant, gentle, kind in a way that made other Nigerian mothers jealous. He greets well, they would say, the highest compliment. He wanted to be a doctor, to help people. He had just finished his first year of medical school when the headaches started. At first, they thought it was stress, exams, adjustment. But the headaches became migraines. The migraines became seizures. By the time they diagnosed him, a rare autoimmune condition attacking his nervous system, so rare it didn't even have a proper Yoruba name, Chukwuemeka had already begun to slip away. Margaret fought like only a Nigerian mother can fight. She brought him back to Lagos, converted her entire guest wing into a private medical facility. She hired round-the-clock nurses. She video-called specialists in different time zones every morning. She spent hours researching on medical journals she barely understood, highlighting passages, demanding explanations. "Madam, the prognosis is not good," Dr. Adeyemi told her gently. He was the head of neurology, a man she'd known socially for years. "I didn't ask for prognosis," Margaret snapped. "I asked for solutions." She tried everything. Experimental drugs from clinical trials in Switzerland, stem cell therapy in Thailand, a traditional healer in Osun State who claimed he could commune with ancestors. She spent money like water, but water was exactly what she needed and couldn't find. Chief Okonkwo tried to talk to her. "Margaret, we need to accept." "Accept what?" Her voice was ice. "Accept that our only son, our miracle, will waste away while we watch." I didn't claw my way out of Surulere to give up now. But Chukwuemeka was giving up, not out of weakness, but out of love. One evening, during one of his rare lucid moments, he took his mother's hand. His fingers were thin now, trembling. "Mummy," he whispered. "I'm tired." "Don't talk like that. You're getting better." Dr. Adeyemi said, "Mummy, please." His eyes, those eyes that used to light up when she came home from work, were dull with pain. "Please let me rest." Margaret stood up so fast her chair fell over. She walked out of the room, out of the house, into the Lagos night. Her driver found her sitting by the pool at 3 a.m., still in her evening dress, tears streaming down her face. The disease was winning. Chukwuemeka could no longer walk, could barely eat, spent most days in a fog of pain medication that didn't quite work. He was 23 years old, and he was dying slowly, expensively, and in agony. What made everything worse were the visitors. They came in waves: church members, business associates, distant relatives who suddenly remembered they were family. They sat in Margaret's living room, drinking her expensive wine, and they all had the same thing to say. "Sister Margaret, you must have faith. God is not asleep. Have you tried Prophet Jeremiah in Festac? He raised a woman from a coma. Maybe there's a family curse. Have you done deliverance?" One particular afternoon, Margaret's eldest sister, Ngozi, came with her prayer group. 5 women in white garments, carrying anointing oil and holy water. They insisted on praying over Chukwuemeka. Margaret watched from the doorway as they laid hands on her unconscious son, speaking in tongues, commanding the devil to leave his body. When they started suggesting that perhaps Chukwuemeka had sinned, that maybe he'd joined a cult in university, Margaret snapped. "Get out," she said quietly. "Sister, we're trying to help." "Get out of my house!" Her scream echoed through the mansion. The prayer warrior scrambled out, muttering about pride and stubbornness. Ngozi stayed behind. "You've changed, Margaret. Money has hardened your heart. In our mother's days, we trusted God, not doctors." "In our mother's days," Margaret replied coldly, "people died of malaria because they trusted prayer over medicine. Our brother Emeka died at 12 because Daddy thought herbs would cure typhoid. You remember that, Ngozi? Or have you rewritten history in your head?" Ngozi left without another word. But the rumors started spreading through their social circle. Margaret Okonkwo, the proud woman who thought she was too big for God. Margaret Okonkwo, who worshipped money instead of the Almighty. Margaret Okonkwo, whose son was suffering because of her arrogance. The rumors reached the Okonkwo's church. Their pastor, a young man who drove a Range Rover and preached about prosperity gospel, visited personally. "Chief Mrs. Okonkwo," he said, his voice dripping with concern. "I've been praying about Chukwuemeka's situation. The Lord showed me something troubling. There might be unforgiveness in this house. Bitterness. These things can block miracles." Margaret stared at him. "Pastor Emmanuel, with all due respect, my son has an autoimmune disease, not a spiritual problem." "But Sister Margaret, all sickness is spiritual at its root." "Then explain to me why children get cancer. Explain to me why babies die of malaria. Are they bitter too? Are they blocking their own miracles?" The pastor shifted uncomfortably. "God's ways are mysterious." Don't give me that." Margaret's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I've given your church 3 million naira in the past year. I've sponsored your crusades. I've bought your books. And now you come here to tell me my son is dying because I'm not faithful enough?" I didn't say, "Get out." After he left, Chief Okonkwo put his hand on Margaret's shoulder. "You're making enemies. Good. I'd rather have enemies than false friends who use my son's suffering as a sermon illustration." But the isolation hurt. Margaret had always been strong, but strength is different from hardness. She was becoming hard because the world demanded it. Every person who visited with advice, every relative who suggested she wasn't doing enough, every church member who whispered that maybe this was God's judgment. They all chipped away at her. The breaking point came during a family meeting. Margaret's mother-in-law, a woman who had never fully approved of her, gathered the extended Okonkwo family. The premise was to discuss Chukwuemeka's care, but it quickly became an intervention. "Margaret," Mama Okonkwo began, her voice heavy with authority. "We need to talk about the hospital bills. You're spending too much. This isn't sustainable." Margaret blinked. "Excuse me? Our son's inheritance." "Our son is alive," Margaret cut in. "Or have you already written him off?" "Don't be disrespectful. I'm talking about being wise. Chukwuemeka would want you to preserve the family wealth." "How dare you?" Margaret stood up, her whole body shaking. "How dare you sit in my house and tell me to let my son die to save money?" "That's not what she's saying," one of Chief Okonkwo's brothers interjected. "We're saying that perhaps it's time to accept God's will." "God's will?" Margaret laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "You people quote God's will when you want someone to stop fighting. Where was God's will when you all came to beg me for money? When your children needed school fees? When your businesses were failing? Then it was Margaret this, Margaret that. But now that I need support, suddenly everything is God's will?" The room fell silent. "Let me tell you something," Margaret continued, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "I grew up poor. I know what it's like when people give up on you because you're not worth the investment. And I swore that no child of mine would ever feel disposable. So you can take your opinions about my spending, about my faith, about God's will, and you can leave my house." They left. All of them. And Margaret stood in her empty living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and Italian marble, and she had never felt more alone. That night, she went to Chukwuemeka's room. He was sleeping, his breathing assisted by machines. She sat beside him and did something she hadn't done in years. She talked to God without the formal prayers, without the King James English, without pretense. "I don't understand your plan," she whispered. "I don't understand why you give people children just to take them away. I don't understand why suffering exists if you're supposed to be love. But I need help. I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired. Please, please show me what to do." No voice answered. No miracle occurred, just the steady beep of machines and the Lagos traffic outside. But in that silence, something shifted in Margaret. Not acceptance, not yet, but a kind of exhausted clarity. It was Chief Okonkwo who first said the words. They were in their bedroom, the kind of luxury suite that now felt like a prison. "Margaret," he said quietly, "we need to talk about Chukwuemeka's wishes. His wishes are to get better. His wishes are to stop suffering." The silence that followed was louder than any argument. "What are you saying?" Margaret's voice was dangerous. "I'm saying, our son is in pain, every day, every minute, and we're keeping him here because we can't let go. You want me to kill my son? I want you to love him enough to hear him." Margaret didn't sleep that night, or the next. She sat in Chukwuemeka's room, listening to him breathe through the ventilator, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. She thought about her father, who died of a stroke in that boys' quarters in Surulere. Quick, relatively painless. A mercy in its way. She thought about all the money she'd made, all the power she'd accumulated, and how none of it could buy the one thing she needed, her son's health. She thought about what the pastors preached. God's time is the best. Miracles happen. Don't give up. And she thought about Chukwuemeka's whisper, "Mummy, please let me rest." On a Thursday morning, Margaret made a call to Dr. Adeyemi. "I need to discuss palliative care," she said. Her voice didn't shake. And I need to understand all our options. The meeting was held in his office, away from the hospital. Just Margaret, Chief Okonkwo, and Dr. Adeyemi. In his condition, the doctor explained carefully, we can manage pain, we can make him comfortable, we can stop the aggressive treatments that are causing additional suffering. And then what? Margaret asked. And then, we let nature take its course. How long? Days, maybe a week. Margaret closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw Chukwuemeka at 5 years old, running through her office, laughing. At 15, towering over her, still calling her mummy without embarrassment. At 22, before the sickness, showing her his acceptance letter to medical school. I want to talk to him first, she said. They reduced Chukwuemeka's medications so he could be lucid. It took 2 days for him to be clear enough to talk. Margaret sat by his bed. She had dressed carefully that morning. Her son always liked when she looked nice. But her hand shook as she held his. Chukwuemeka, she began, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Yes, Mummy. His voice was thin, but his eyes were clear. If we could stop all this, the treatments, the pain, if we could let you rest, is that what you want? Tears streamed down Chukwuemeka's face. Yes, Mummy, please. But I'll lose you. You'll never lose me. I'm your son forever. But Mummy, he squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of hurting. I want to go with dignity. I want to say goodbye properly. Not like this. Not as this. This thing I've become. Margaret broke then. The woman who never cried in business meetings, who stared down board members twice her size, who rebuilt her company after the 2008 crash without flinching. She shattered. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry I couldn't fix this. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Mummy. Chukwuemeka's voice was gentle. You gave me an amazing life. You loved me so much. You fought for me. You didn't fail. Some things even you can't control. They talked for hours about his childhood, about memories Margaret had forgotten, about how proud he was of her, about heaven if it existed, and whether they'd meet again. I believe we will, Chukwuemeka whispered. And Mummy, thank you for letting me go. 3 days later, surrounded by family, with his favorite Afrobeat songs playing softly, Chukwuemeka Okonkwo passed away. They said Margaret had killed him. The whispers started at the funeral. How could a mother stop treatment when she had money? How could she give up? Some called her a murderer. Others crossed themselves when she walked by. But those who were in that room, those who saw Chukwuemeka's face in those final moments, knew the truth. He died holding his mother's hand. He died without pain. He died whispering, "Thank you." Margaret never defended herself. She never explained. She established a foundation in Chukwuemeka's name for palliative care in Nigeria, for families who couldn't afford to let their loved ones die with dignity. And every Thursday, she visits his grave in Ikoyi Cemetery. She brings flowers. She tells him about the business. She tells him she misses him. And she tells him that loving someone sometimes means letting them go. This is a story about wealth and powerlessness, about a mother's love that was strong enough to break her own heart, about the choices we make when there are no good options. Margaret Okonkwo paid the highest price a mother can pay, but she bought her son peace. And sometimes, that's all love can do. If this story moved you, if you believe these difficult, beautiful, heartbreaking stories deserve to be told, please subscribe. Help me reach 100,000 subscribers. Help me prove that powerful storytelling still matters. Thank you for listening.